Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are again at 8 p.m. on Saturday and with a special edition of VERITAS of Bengal Volunteers. Today we are going to discuss, or our central subject today is the culture of political violence in Bengal. A few of us know, not many, that there is a legacy of political violence in Bengal. And it's of more than a century. While the other Indian states remain surprised to see the political rivalry and the vehemence of violence in it, we can say that Bengal is at least in this sector are conscious enough to retain the legacy of annihilation, of bloodshed and violence. And this violence gets back to almost 120 years ago from now. The political violence or the chronicles of revolt against the British imperialism that had initiated in the 1900s were of extreme importance. Certainly, it was to wrest the freedom from the foreign yokes of the British, to get rid of the British imperialists' burden on us, but certainly it was also part of politics. And at the time, to eject or to defeat the British or to drive them out, application of violence was considered as one of the foremost options to deal with. The masculine Hinduist concepts, the new consciousness, the political consciousness in Bengal led to the path of revolution. To many modern day political scientists and also pundits, it was inevitable. In 1905, Onusila Samiti, or the pioneer of revolutionary struggle in Bengal, had organized a Durga Puja under the stewardship of another legendary revolutionary Pulin Bihari Das, or the founder of the Dhaka Onusila Samiti. And the Durga Puja was quite unique. In that puja, there is no idol, but the entire structure of Mother Goddess was designed by weapons, by the sharp weapons, the daggers, the arrows, the spears, the swords. And in 1907, when the infamous Jamalpur riot took place in Mymensingh, now in Bangladesh and Australia's Pakistan, the hell was let loose. It must be stated that Onusila Samiti's name got famed within the Bengalis only, or even through this Jamalpur riot. The Dhaka Onusila Samiti, the revolutionists of Bengal, from Calcutta, went to Jamalpur with own types of arms and ammunition to lead the betrayed, aggrieved, and persecuted Hindus. And from that time on, the political violence has been ceaseless. The application of political violence against the British, then there was the revolt of 1942, followed by the 1946 riots and partition. Some had hoped that it would end the political violence or the violent schools of thoughts or confrontations in this land, but all was in vain. With the emergence of the communist parties in the 1950s and 60s, Calcutta became a battleground. Though the other parts of West Bengal did also suffer all these calamities, but certainly being the capital city, Calcutta was the worst. In 1960s, Calcutta happened to be the battleground of violent confrontations. I think the violent confrontation would be a very, very major word to describe it. It was virtually a warfare between the communist parties, the Naxalites and the CPIM. On the other hand, there was the Youth Congress or the Juba Congress and the Naxalites, and the Juba Congress versus the CPIM. Bloodshed, violence, turmoil became the talk of the town and also of the state. In the 34 years, there has never been any end to all these things. In the Trinamool era, contrary to expectations, the saga of violence has increased rapidly. In 2003, there was a Panchayat election. In the Panchayat election, it was marred by violence and bloodshed. Even in 2018, there was a continuation and repetition of the same. The reputed Prime Minister of India, Modi ji, at the time, expressed his fears or apprehensions of worst if this is not checked. But still, after 5 years from then, even 2023, the Panchayat election in Bengal is being shrouded by blood. What we have seen as a prelude in Bangalore, there was apprehensions that it is going to increase, and we do not know what is going to be the picture. And that all this indicate the political violence has been a ceaseless affair or culture in Bengal. And to discuss on all this, we have a very special guest with us. We have Mr. Surajit Dasgupta. Surajit is an eminent journalist. He had seen Calcutta on very close quarters in the 80s and the 90s. Then in Delhi, he is at the national capital. He is acquainted with all the developments of Bengal. From there, he is also going to put contacts in Calcutta and other parts of the state. So, without wasting any more time, so Surajit, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Onimitro. Great to be here.
Thank you, Surajit. Well, Surajit, just when you were sharing, I was just talking to the audience that political violence and its legacy in Bengal has been a ceaseless affair. If we go through the revolutionary periods from the 1905, 7, 12, and from that time on, violence has remained one of the most prized legacy in Bengal, and its ceaseless continuation makes it the most politically violent state in India. And to some extent, there have been religious violations also, but political violence has ruled the state, has been ruling the state for more than a century. So I'd like to know, how do you analyze and what is your comments on this? I'd like to know, sir. Please.
Well, even as I was outside the frame of the camera, I was very keenly listening to your introduction, and I have followed every part of it. So there is no problem with that. And I would like to begin by addressing the pan-Indian audience of your show by saying that there is an... am I audible? Am I clear?
Yes. Fine, sir. Fine.
Yeah. So this is something that I tell my non-Bengali acquaintances and friends time and again, that Bengal has been quite unfortunate for being on the forefront even of the freedom movement and yet being neglected time and again. I think initially the issue with this aversion or kind of an allergic reaction, especially of North India towards Bengal, and probably they were absolutely in the dark about South India. Much of that has improved of late, of course. But what had happened in the case of Bengal is that, the rise of the middle class that we saw in the late 19th century, caused vastly by Bengalis traveling abroad, especially to England for higher studies, and British government facilitating those travels, and inadvertently, getting a very raw deal out of it, because from the exposure to European-style nationalism that Bengalis got from there, they came back and led the freedom movement here. Now, given the kind of educational orientation that the British were giving Indians, everything that was foreign, everything that was European, was supposedly superior to whatever was indigenous. That was a kind of impression being built by the then colonial regime. As a result, this exposure to the knowledge of Europe, the knowledge of European history, French Revolution, and in the early part of the 20th century, the Russian Revolution, and all that, they were enthusing the Bengali crowd. So earlier, middle class is often misunderstood as the middle income group. That is not the middle class. Middle class is the only conscious class of any country. And that majorly took shape primarily and initially in Bengal, leading to this consciousness that we were not independent. We were under foreign rule and hence we needed independence. It was that feeling that manifested many a times in form of violent or armed revolutions rather than the Dadabhai Nauroji method of negotiations or even uh, Gandhi's method of satyagraha. It was remarkably different. So then, of course, the Gandhian politics also came in, which resulted in a kind of uh, you know uh, aversion towards a very adverse reaction of that cabal of Nehru and the coterie of Gandhi that worked also against Subhash Chandra Bose when he was elected in the Indian National Congress as its president. And Pattabhi Sitaramayya's defeat was seen by Gandhi as his own defeat. So his boycott began. Finally, there was, circumstances led him to leave the Congress. And anyway, I'm not getting into the details of all his escape to Europe and forming of the Indian National Army with the help of prisoners of war of the First World War and all that. But what happened is thereafter, the kind of political violence that we will be focusing on today is the post-Indian independence political violence, and that began or that started brewing up somewhere in the 1960s. If the pan-Indian audience must understand what was actually happening then they could perhaps look at the films. So films are very often a reflection of what is going on in society. So you could clearly see that the initial exuberance and enthusiasm and zeal of having attained independence, which was actually a transfer of power, had dissipated by then. By about 1.5 decades, they found out that the kind of India that was promised under an Indian government has not materialized. And that was when this consciousness once again surfaced to the maximum in Bengal. To be precise, in a place called Naxalbari, which is otherwise an obscure, remote place. Nobody would have heard of it if not for the Naxal Andolon. Now, that again was a misleading thing, because if what the Nehru regime and followed by the Indira Gandhi regime had not been able to accomplish what they had promised or what the Indians had expected of them, most certainly violence was not the legitimate reaction to that. And one thing that communists get revolution is an alien idea in this country. India has always seen evolution, never a revolution. We are not the kind of people like Hungarians or the French people or even Russians who one fine morning find everything as wrong. We march into the streets, we topple the government and form our own government. That is not how things work in India. It will never work, because everything said and done, the Indian state is a very strong institution, nearly invincible. You cannot fight it. And therefore, the most you can do is resort to very petty kind of violence, like hurling bombs indiscriminately, firing at people indiscriminately. So sometimes it happens for a change in government, as in the case of Nokshals, and in the case of terrorists, the people who we generally refer to as terrorists, they also take arms like AK-47, AK-56 in their hands, hurl grenades at civilian installations, and everything like that. So, this thing that happened in Bengal, quite strangely, did not get the kind of attention across India that it should have. And in fact, even now, today, when you see the Hindi language media or most of the people from north of the Vindhyas refer to Maoists as Naxals, they are actually technically incorrect, because Naxalism is finished. Naxalism is gone. It is dead. These people who you see in Dantewada or in Gadchiroli or in pockets of Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Bihar, etc., they have nothing to do with Kanu Sanyal. They have their ideologues are mostly Telugu speakers in some part of Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, and they do not even mingle in the public, come out in the open, and they are not even young people, unlike the Naxals of the second half of 1960s in Bengal, who were mostly college professors and students. So anyway, that was misleading, and somehow the Indira Gandhi government at that point of time was a bit marginally more concerned about the state of affairs of Bengal than what she became in the 70s and the 80s. In the 60s, she was still somewhat sensitized to the situation, and maybe those years, since the power was still in the hands of the Congress till 1977, she thought that the state could be retained under Congress control, which is why Siddharth Shankar Rai was brought in, and how he repressed the Naxal movement also does not, smell of roses. One reason why Bengal is so backward, other than its 34 years of communist rule, prior to that, communist violence, the reason is that almost a full generation of youth went missing from Bengal. Because, in suspicion of any young man to be a suspect, to be a Naxal suspect, the police of West Bengal would pick them late in the night, and those boys never returned home. So, if you move around in Kolkata and parts of West Bengal that were the most affected by Naxalism, you would find that every third or fourth or fifth house has an uncle who never returned home, or a grandfather who never returned home, which is why the most vibrant part of the youth that Bengal could have benefited from, either they went astray, they became mercenaries of a kind of a militia with very childish kind of dreams that they could do in India what Mao did in China, or what Stalin subsequently did. It is very ironic that the communists in India believe that it was a very rosy picture in Stalin regime in Russia, whereas he was no less diabolical than Adolf Hitler. If Adolf Hitler had concentration camps, he had gulags. And far many more people died in gulags, and also during the great leap forward of China, led by Mao Zedong, than the number of Jews who were killed in the Holocaust. So, anyway, they are always, their ideologues, their demagogues, make it a point that they never get to know the entire history of Europe while they are indoctrinating new recruits. So, anyway, what we often mistake, or the general Indian crowd refers to, is 34 years of CPM rule. But effectively, just like the atmosphere of the United States today under a Democrat dispensation, where increasingly, even though America kind of bans communism, communist ideas are germinating in the minds of impressionable youth. They are looking for socialist measures like high taxation and welfareism, etc. In effect, the communist rule in West Bengal was much longer than those 34 years. They had effectively started when the Naxalism, when the Naxal kind of revolution, so-called revolution, had started. Because what you see, certain instances, for example, the Shaibari massacre. The Shaibari massacre did not happen under CPM rule. So that was the time when the communists were increasingly asserting their power, their influence over suburbs, over villages, over the rural landscape, with the promise to the gullible people that a motley group of rich people rule over you, and you are supposed to loot them, plunder them, kill them if needed, to usurp their properties, and that will be distributed among you in the name of land reforms. Wherever I went, I came from a small town of Jharkhand to Kolkata, and wherever I went, I found it was the Jyoti Basu era, and I would find on all wall paintings by graffiti by the CPM cadre that very proudly announced Amul Bhumi Sanskar, total land reforms. And that is ridiculous. Land reforms in West Bengal was nothing but a Robin Hoodian kind of an approach to governance, where you loot and kill the rich and distribute the bounty among the dacoits. And very obviously, then these people became the champions of communism. These gundas, these goons, these hooligans, these hoodlums became fans of communism because they had pecuniary benefits from it. Subsequently, what happened was that every time, this is another thing, this I am addressing to people who believe that most Bengalis are communists, that the Congress and the CPM-led left front, at the peak of popularity of the Congress there, even while getting losing elections to CPM, the Congress would secure just about 2% of vote share less than the left front. And that 2% proved crucial in determining the number of seats either side won, which is how very often, even during Jyoti Basu's period, the CPM feared that they might lose power. And whenever they feared that, they reminded the people of 1972. Bahattorer Kalodin. That is how, at the final stages of any election campaign, the CPM would remind people of how dark, quote unquote dark, the era of Congress used to be. And they would throw this loaded question to the people, asking them, would you like those days to return? Obviously, people would panic because the violence unleashed by the police to repress the Naxal movement was equally, brutal. And therefore, the people had those memories quite fresh in their minds. Out of panic, they would once again vote for the Communist Party. And no so-called right-wing party existed back then. Then,
So,
of course,
Surajit,
yeah,
it was also the time in the 70s and the 80s when the Congress cadres used to make the crude bombs or fix the revolvers before the portraits of Mahatma Gandhi. It was also the time.
yes,
The Congress that was speaking of non-violence, their cadres used to make the crude bombs before the portraits of Nehru and Gandhi in Bengal. Okay, but what I would like to know from you, sir, that do you think that the partition of Bengal and the inflow of the refugees from that part of East Pakistan to West Bengal, and the disaffection of the youth, uh, the 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 poverty that inspired for the or the that made that created a road between the disgruntled youth and the political parties, and for that reason there was no dearth of no less of cadres or cannon fodder for the political parties. Do you think so? There's so much dissatisfaction. There's no
That's right.
development, social development. The government was completely apathetic to them. And for that reasons, these cadres for political parties had gained a huge number of cadres that could fight for them. Do you think like that? I'd like to know, sir.
See, what happened during the 70s and 80s was that obviously it is not in the human tendency to keep taking all the beating and not respond, not retaliate. So obviously the Congress cadre also resorted to violence. And the issue with that was that they were not supported by the center. The center has always been apathetic to things that are happening in West Bengal and several other states as well. Today's topic being West Bengal, we are focusing on that. But the point was, mostly they were the CPM goons who would beat, maim, kill Congress cadre, and let's say in 1 out of every 5 incidents, the Congress would hit back. But then again, coming to the point where finally in 97, 98, Mamata Banerjee broke away from the Congress and floated her Trinamool Congress. I have, to that limited extent, some sympathies for Mamata Banerjee for the simple reason that she was the genuine anti-CPM face in the state back then in the 1990s. There was no other alternative. And even so, despite her credentials as a no-nonsense anti-CPM politician in West Bengal, because even a person of the stature of Pranab Mukherjee, who went on to become the president of the country, had a very dubious political background. For example, I'll name 3 people, 3 very prominent Congress leaders: Priyaranjan Dasmunshi, Somen Mitra, and Pranab Mukherjee. So the faction of Mamata Banerjee that was genuinely anti-CPM always suspected that this trio would leak vital information to the CPM as and when they planned a big agitation against the ruling party. And that is how all the programs of protest by the Congress, that was the only real opposition in the state back then, they fizzled out. I have been witness to a few agitations by Chhatra Parishad. For the North Indian crowd, let me tell them that what they know as NSUI in North India is Chhatra Parishad in West Bengal. So, absolutely peaceful marches were planned, and somewhere in the middle, someone would hurl a bomb. Nobody knew who that guy was, because none in the crowd had bombs in hand, and a march was planned towards the writers' building. And while approaching the writers' building, someone would hurl a bomb, and the police would get an excuse to hit back at the protesters who had never planned any kind of violence in the first place. So such things were happening. Finally, out of frustration, Mamata Banerjee broke away. And even after breaking away, that is in the late 1990s, we saw that she struggled for many more years to finally come to power in 2011. So it was not that the moment the voters of West Bengal got a very clear choice, because they also knew that that an influential section of the Congress was compromised. Take, for example, the former president of India that I referred to. He could never win a popular election. He would always reach parliament through the Rajya Sabha route. And he never had enough votes. The Congress never had enough votes in the Paschim Banga Vidhan Sabha, the Legislative Assembly of West Bengal, to be able to send him to the parliament. And that is where he needed CPM's votes in the assembly so that he could reach Rajya Sabha. So how can such a person be anti-CPM genuinely? He couldn't. And then there were issues of mutual conflict or conflict of interest. In the case of Priyaranjan Das Munshi, he had his own Howrah constituency to cater to, and then he was also involved in football management, if you remember, and that had that Mohun Bagan versus East Bengal politics, because the supporters of either of the club may not be equally politically divided as pro Congress or pro CPM. So that was another problem with him, because he had to maintain that hegemony in the local football administration. And then there are other stories about Shomen Mitro. Then, of course, the mayor of one time, who was very close to Mamata Banerjee, Shubroto. So all these people were compromised congressmen. Anyway, since we are discussing violence, we must move to the point where.
But Surajit, just a minute.
Yeah.
Surajit, even in the 1970s, or even when the left front was at the helm of affairs in Bengal for 34 years, there was no less to stiff rivalries or violent clashes between the leftist parties. So on many occasions, we have found whether in Murshidabad or South Indian Parganas, the RSP and the CPIM had clashed violently, leading to several casualties. If you remember, in 1989, on 31st August, the SUCI and a few Naxalite parties organized a resist and to mark the 50th year of that food movement, Khadwando in 1959. Sorry, the 30th year. SUCI and the Naxalite groups conducted a mass rally that was fired upon, and a person called Madhai Haldar, a 14 year child boy, was killed in the broad daylight, and that led to a great number of disasters and turmoils in the intercity and other places also. So my question is that there had been a trouble between the Congress and the Communist parties. There had been inter-trouble between the communist parties. But at the same time, many people have turned to me, have talked to me, told me that even the Marxists, that had there been no such partition in 1947, there wouldn't have been any such degeneration of political climate. But I would like to know from you and this on this critical juncture, the Hindus who the inflow of the Hindus into West Bengal and the Hindus who remained in West Pakistan have failed considerably to fight against the Islamists. I'm not talking of the Muslims, the Islamists that they had who had overthrown them from their own lands. So how can these Hindus, when they're coming to West Bengal, become prone to violence so that they can enthuse these political parties to go for murderous adventures? How can it be? I can fight in my own land, and I have to I have to flee for that. And when I come to this part land, I become a person like Arnold Schwarzenegger, that I can hurl the bombs, pull the triggers. It is so easy. Or there is some other thing. There is some other things behind the curtain as well. I would like to know from you, sir.
Yeah, there are quite a few socio-economic political reasons behind this. First of all, any resistance to the communist movement or government has never been attached as efficiently to the economy of the people as the communists managed to do in their own case. First of all, I have already mentioned that the champions of communism at the ground level were mostly beneficiaries of the loot that went on in the name of land reforms. So they obviously clearly had monetary benefits, property benefits in that case. The Congress could never offer such an incentive to be uh, associated with any kind of movement that they could have had. You
Sir,
would
just a
see
minute,
this.
just a minute. Sir, just a minute. Do you want to add the term the lumpen proletariat in this case? The lumpen proletariats.
Yes. Yes,
Thank you.
that is the popular term in Kolkata's intellectual circles also, lumpen proletariat, and that is what it means, because what the rest of India must know is what it means is that crass violence is passed off as class violence. and therefore the intellectual class would come on TV when the goons would hit the streets, and that they will pass it off as people's revolution. It's actually funny that one of the mouthpieces of a communist party is called People's Revolution. But anyway, what I was coming to was the fact that this inability of opposition to communism to attach the economy of the cadre with the political ideology is a failure which must be addressed. Because you see the kind of supine or docile behavior that you see in East Bengalis, which is otherwise unexpected, because they have been some of the worst victims of religious extremism carnage that went on during the partition of India. And all the literature, all the films are made only about Punjab partition. What Ritik Ghatak might have made on Bengal partition is actually a very kind of highly emotional, very Rudali kind of appeal to the senses, rather than a call for taking in the on the international scene. Just yesterday, I was pointing out on Twitter, I named two very famous sports persons, Martina Navratilova and Ivan Lendl, who were Czech by origin. They belonged to one of the Warsaw Pact countries. And the tax was so backbreaking in that communist socialist part of Europe that they had to escape to the United States. But look at these East European people who are now American citizens. They are voters of Democrats. Unlike Arnold Schwarzenegger, they are Democrats. And they also, do advocacy of the kind as to why more Muslims are not let into their country. So they are calling for suicide, a cultural, civilizational suicide. Now, the additional thing that happened in case of West Bengal is something that happened across India beginning with the mid 1980s. What happened in 60s and 70s in West Bengal also happened in 80s, when Congress started losing state after state after state, where there was a time when it ruled all the states of the country. Then they started losing South India, and finally they lost North India as well, most prominently Uttar Pradesh. Now, in that course, the problem with Bengalis is when other Indians got, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, people had the choice between Samajwadi Party and Bahujan Samaj Party. People of Tamil Nadu had the choice between DMK and AIADMK. People in Maharashtra had a choice between the Congress or the Shiv Sena. BJP was and also ran there. Main party then was Balasaheb Thackeray's Shiv Sena. At that point, Bengal got CPM. And this the next part of my answer would also deal with the misconception why rest of the country largely believes that Bengalis tend to be communist. Because what attracted about CPM, the factor of CPM that attracted Bengalis, was that it was regional in character. It was not a Delhi-based party. Being a Delhi-based party is a kind of dubious recognition that both Congress and BJP gets in faraway states that are far away from Delhi, and that becomes one of the big reasons for their loss in those elections. So, what Bengalis saw CPM as is not a communist party, but a Bengali party. That is very important, because time and again in CPM's campaign, you would notice that they would harp on a term called Kendrer Bonchona, negligence by the center. So anybody who was ruling from Delhi was supposed to be remote, was supposed to be distant, was supposed to be apathetic to the cries, to the plights of average Bengalis. Which is why, Jyoti Basu was nothing but, Mulayam Singh Yadav of West Bengal, or he was nothing but MG Ramchandran of West Bengal. So when Tamil Nadu got MG Ramchandran, when Uttar Pradesh got Mulayam Singh Yadav, we got Jyoti Basu. That he happens to be a communist is just incidental. It is not the primary factor for his vote catching power. Now, this is, of course, then the other factor, the inability of the opposition to add economy to the interest of the cadre, which is something that Mamata Banerjee does understand. And that is what I was coming to in my previous answer, that towards the middle of Buddhadev Bhattacharya's reign, when the Singur and Nondigram agitations took place, all the goons of CPM realized that their days in the communist regime was numbered. It wouldn't last very long, and the wind was clearly blowing in the direction of the Trinamool Congress. Very opportunistically, they switched camps. And that is why thereafter, in the past more than a decade of Trinamool Congress's rule, in the absence of the strength of an ideology, Trinamool Congress does not have any ideology. It's like the Aam Aadmi Party of Delhi. You know, even if you hold a gun at the temple of Arvind Kejriwal and ask him about what should be India's foreign policy, education policy, what should be its infrastructure policy, he cannot say a word about it. All he knows about is naale saaf karwa do, road theek karwa do. His concerns are very municipal in nature. Similar is the idea with Mamata Banerjee. She does not have a vision, but what she does have is a trick that the communists employed, is extending pecuniary benefits of the governance model that she has to her workers, to her party workers. This is something that no opposition party can do, of course, unless you are supported by an international cabal or mafia, as communists are. Communists are able to do things even while being in opposition, which no other political formation anywhere in the world can, because nobody else has an international presence. And therefore, they have global funding avenues. They also have even without the foreign help, culture of cooperation. I'll give a very easy example that people can relate to. In several videos, one might have heard Shabana Azmi talk very proudly about her father, Kaifi Azmi. And she would often say that, and even Javed Akhtar sometimes repeats that story, that Kaifi Azmi, a full-time card holder of CPM, used to keep just 40 rupees from his earnings to fend for his family, and the rest of his income he would donate to the Communist Party Corpus Fund. And that is what all his contemporaries and peers in the Communist Party did. Now, even if you're talking about the 1960s and 70s, was it possible even then to run a whole month on mere 40 rupees? That is absurd. So how did Kaifi Azmi manage, let's say? How did he buy vegetables every day? How did he buy mutton or beef or whatever his family ate? Because they were not malnourished poor people. How did he manage in 40 rupees a month? That is because they work on mutual cooperation. You have this entire ecosystem of intellectuals, communist intellectuals, who would extend to you benefits like, for example, if you are a poet, you will get invitations for Kavi Sammelan, Mushaira, and there he could charge anything without the Communist Party of India or Communist Party of India Marxist coming to know about it. And in those days, even if he were to charge, let's say, 1,000 rupees per Mushaira, he was a super rich person. At the same time, he gets this bragging right to say, oh, see how humble we are. I run my family only on 40 rupees. So that is how communism works. This is something many other political rivals of the communists must ponder over and make a mechanism out of that. Anyway, let's come back to the issue of violence. Post Shingur and Nondigram, we saw the emergence of also Shubhendu Adhikari, who now happens to be the leader of opposition in West Bengal. And he does not have a direct ideological link with the Bharatiya Janata Party. But then what can Bharatiya Janata Party do? Because in the absence of emergence of any personality in his or her own right, because give the devil her due, Mamata Banerjee did suffer a lot before becoming so big. She was at least twice fatally, near fatally attacked, assaulted. And, I happened to be a witness to one of the incidents when I was a college student, the incident that happened near Goriahat. So we friends were just passing by, just spending some time in the evening when this attack happened. And, call it providence or whatever, a crew.
Surajit, are you referring to the attack in Hajra in 1990? Hajra.
There are two attacks that happened. One was
Hmm.
on the way from Goriahat towards towards the Rashbihari Avenue.
Yes,
Uh,
it's a Hajra crossing. Hajra crossing.
that was another attack.
1990. Oh, okay.
That was another attack. She has
Okay.
suffered two attacks then. That was another one. So, by a stroke of luck, a crew of Anand Bajar Putrika was passing by and they caught it on camera. They caught the incident on camera, and the whole state was taken aback by the brutality of the attack. Many had suspected she would die, but she somehow survived. And look at this. Look at the difference between this sentiment of Bengali people and the sentiment of other people or other Indians. Any incident of this kind, if it happens anywhere in the country, elsewhere, outside West Bengal, the government will immediately fall in the next election. No such thing happened. No such thing happened in Bengal. And one of the reasons, of course, was that every time CPM was on the verge of a defeat, they would remind people of 1972. And then people would get scared and panicked, and once again, they would vote for the left. Anyway, so the point is, when we are discussing political violence in West Bengal, and I would put it on record that it is the most politically violent part of India, often not to the knowledge of the rest of Indians, which is unfortunate. And it is one thing good that has happened with the entry of BJP in West Bengal is now at least the rest of India is getting sensitized to it, is coming to know about it. No matter when BJP will finally succeed, maybe in a few more decades. But one thing good that it has done is that it has let the rest of India know what actually happens in everyday life of West Bengal. We may be discussing big, major incidents, but very normally, let's say, when I was in college in Kolkata, when I would pass through the area which is near Shialda, the Moulali, then there is a place before that that is called Entali. Almost every day, I would see gang wars happening there, and they were political gangs, not crooks like the Mumbai gangs, not the Dawood Ibrahim variety. They were political gangs hurling bombs at each other using country-made pistols, and this was like business as usual. I remember I used to commute by those either a minibus or that red colored or orange colored state bus or that tin type bus, and people would just peep out of the windows of the buses, see the commotion inside the alleys and lanes of that area up to Beliaghata. towards Salt Lake. There is a route number 14, bus 14, that begins from the 8B bus stand of Jadavpur. And from there, it goes up to Karunamoyi of Salt Lake, I think. So almost daily, we would see in that stretch right after crossing Park Circus up to Beliaghata. That was an extremely violent place. And despite being the capital of the state, it never got any kind of news coverage. Forget about national coverage, even the local media had taken it for granted that this is how life is supposed to be. Yeah.
Now, Surajit, now we are talking to a very critical question that with the entrance of the Bharatiya Janata Party, you had just said that the Bengalis had assumed the Communist Party to be a regional party, and that was against the center, that the Delhi that was apathetic to the Bengalis. Now, with the entrance of the Bharatiya Janata Party in the last decade, if we count between 2014 to 2023, the Bharatiya Janata Party in Bengal happens to be the sole oppositional force without any other opposition force, so that they are not being challenged by the left even. The lefts are no more in the subway. But unfortunately, despite there have been several issues in the state, several issues of worse tendencies, be it the communal rights, be it demographic changes, or this diabolical measures like that, looting the public money, everything. But unfortunately, the Bharatiya Janata Party has never tried to follow the traditional Bengal line of opposition politics. In many cases, either it has remained silent, it either has gone to His Excellency the Governor, or prayed for betterment by holding dharnas before the Gandhi statue. So, do you think this opposition politics that is prominent in the other states of India is going to have any benefit, or is going to have any hold or water in the coming days in Bengal? Do you think this type of opposition politics is acceptable to the Bengal scenario?
I think the situation is going to change. But why is it not changing instantly? I would blame both the sides, both the people and the polity of Bengal, and then the apathy or negligence by the typical North Indian crowd that dominates both Congress and BJP. First, let me introspect and find fault within ourselves. If you look at the history of Bengali Renaissance, it was as religious, as Hinduistic religious as things could be. Where did we lose that? That is our mistake, number one. Why did we not continue moving in the path shown by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bama Khapa, Ramakrishna Paramahansha? Why did we not pursue that path? Even Anushilan Shomiti that you talked of in the introduction was largely, influenced by the religiosity. Why did we not have another Aurobindo? And then, this secularization of Bengal's polity under the Congress is to a great extent responsible. And I always name two states, Bengal and Tamil Nadu, where the people in their private lives, in their personal lives, are highly religious. In the context of Bengal, you would hardly see a neighborhood that does not have a Kalibari or a Hori Sabha. Whereas, when you ask them to assert their Hindu identity in politics, they grow cold feet. The same thing happens in Tamil Nadu. Can anybody name another state of India that is more religious than Tamil Nadu? Some of the greatest temples, the core of the Chola kingdoms, Tanjavur. Think of a DMK ruling that state now. So, unless religious sensitivity mixes with political consciousness, people are going to suffer. And then, of course, there were no regional leaders after Bidhan Chandra Rai. Now, if you come to the present day, even if I were to blame the BJP for not understanding Bengalis well enough, they could shoot back by saying, who do you want to entrust uh, our faith on? Similar questions are asked everywhere. Delhi BJP struggles to defeat Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi. And if you approach Amit Shah and Narendra Modi saying that why don't you change the leadership of Delhi unit of the BJP, they do not have any choice. Now I am coming to the blame that must be shared first by the Congress that did this, that became more and more callous towards West Bengal, and that is something that we found in a different manner in the case of BJP. BJP had a stupendous head start if it could have, uh, you know, cashed in on that popularity during the height of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. What happened in the late 80s and the early 90s was that in the absence of any long standing BJP presence in the state, people who were Congress supporters started switching camps. Because remember that the Sangh Parivar had some excellent orators back then. And the kind of compelling arguments that they gave, not only about why the Babri Masjid should not be there and a Ram temple should be there, but also an assortment of Hindu Muslim questions. Why now we are talking about uniform civil code, and that demand had germinated back then. So it's a 30-year-old issue. At least for 30 or 40 years, we have been hearing the Sangh Parivar raise this demand for a uniform civil code. Now, when Bengalis were getting drawn towards the BJP because of such rhetoric or oratory, they made a big blunder, a big mistake of getting identified as a party of Marwadis. At least for 2 decades, since the Ram Janmabhoomi movement and demolition of the Babri Masjid, by and large, the Bengali society identified the BJP as a Bada Bazar party, a party headquartered in Bada Bazar, which is a Marwadi hub. So that kind of an image was not conducive to expansion in the state, which is primarily a Bengali speaking state. In the next step, when they finally decided that they would jump headlong into mainstream electoral politics, they faced a kind of dilemma. They did not know what kind of people political Bengalis are. Not any Bengali, but what kind of people political Bengalis are. As a result, they entered the land of Ma Durga with a chant of Jai Shri Ram. Anyway, uh, against all kind of counseling and advices that they were given, let's say that, all right, in the long run, over the past 7 8 years or so, finally Jai Shri Ram has attained a cult status even in the state, and now it no longer means if you say Jai Shri Ram, you are Bohiragato, you are an outsider. What Jai Shri Ram, any Hindu saying Jai Shri Ram in Bengal essentially means is that he is declaring his political identity as a Hindu. So that is something good. Nevertheless, how to understand the nuances of the politics of any region and make the best of it. I am not talking about just idealism, but also realism and pragmatism. Take, for instance, all the turncoats who had come from Trinamool Congress to the BJP. There were several crooks in them. Let's be very honest about it. Mukul Rai is a number one crook. But what is his value? What is the value addition he brings to any party he joins? Election management. Could the BJP use him that way? It could not. So there are people, there are so many people from Bengal who called me up after Mukul Rai returned to Trinamool Congress The first of all, you knew that this guy is a crook. Why did you call him? Secondly, if you did call him, why did you not exploit him? What kind of stupidity was that? So, how to manage elections at the booth level. This is a core competence area of Mukul Roy. That was never utilized. So what were they trying to do with him? Giving him a vice president's post, which is meaningless. So, two things broadly. One, some Bengali has to rise above the crowd, above the level of the crowd, to draw a pan-Indian attention, and thus also draw the attention of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah. That is on Bengalis. That is not on Modi and Shah. What is on Modi and Shah is that once such a personality rises, as of now, I cannot see anybody in the horizon who has that kind of a stature, even of Bidhan Chandra Rai, let's say, or Mamata Banerjee, let's say. Mamata Banerjee in the time of Jyoti Basu. If such a person rises and then the center throws its weight behind him, and very importantly, they appreciate and follow the Bengali values and mores. And it is quite easy, the ideals on which Shyama Prasad Mukherjee had founded the Janasangh, whose current avatar is Bharatiya Janata Party. It is very easy to slightly tweak them to make it Bengal-centric. This is a land of Bankim Chandra. This is the land of Vivekananda. And therefore, very clearly, even the manifesto that Amit Shah had read out before the 2021 election, it had glimpses or hints that Bharatiya Janata Party was thinking along those lines, but those were never harped on. What was harped on in speech after speech by the Prime Minister are Vikas, 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 such a dry and uninteresting slogan. And then you make the mistake of referring to Mamata Banerjee as Didi. This is something where Bengalis and the rest of Indians think alike. Didi is a very affectionate call. If she indeed is your rival, and a very evil and devilish rival, you should not be referring to her, addressing her as Didi. The opposition had problems with his sarcastic tone. Didi, oh Didi. Well, forget about the tone. Forget about all these semantics. Concentrate on the word. You are using a word of affection, Didi. You cannot make that mistake again when the next election comes in West Bengal.
Surajit, we are just on the verge of the ending. I'd like to know that it's a history in Bengal that the opposition party who has struggled extremely, has gone to the violent methods to oust the government, whether democratically or even the political struggles in the streets, like the Congress did against the British, the left did against the Congress, like the Mamata Banerjee did against the lefts. So my question is, do you think that when the opposition in Bengal at the moment is quite silent, as far as we are seeing, I do not know what is happening in other parts of the Bengal, since they are not coming to us in the media. In this political climate, do you think it's possible for the Bharatiya Janata Party to come to power? And number two, do you think that if the Bharatiya Janata Party comes to power in Bengal, it will end the violent political culture of the state?
That will take a very long time. It is not a matter of just a switch in power from one party to another. It takes a very long time to, first of all, figure out what would you do with this entire quote-unquote workforce of gundas. What do you do with them? Dump all of them in jail? In politics, that is not an option. In politics, hoodlums are allowed to switch camps. Idealistically speaking, that should not happen. but ideals don't work in politics. So, what is of a greater concern is the political astuteness of the BJP, which I think is doubtful. Let's consider Muslims under Jyoti Basu. They are the same Muslims who are under Mamata Banerjee, right? So, so under Jyoti Basu's rule, Muslims were on a tight leash. We did not hear 2 or 3 riots every year during those 34 years of CPM rule. The first time Muslims went berserk under CPM rule was when Taslima Nasreen had to leave Calcutta and seek refuge elsewhere in India. That goon called Idris Ali took the entire city of Calcutta he held it to ransom. That was the first time when Muslims went out of control. So any political goon, whether it is Hindu or Muslim, it would depend on the BJP whether it can keep them under leash the way Jyoti Basu used to keep Muslims under leash. And without, risking the possibility that Muslims may go against him. Muslims had no choice because they are, in a way, very smart. You would say, whoever is most likely to occupy power, provided that party is not branded as anti-Muslim, they would go for it. So therefore, Congress did not stand a chance when it was competing with CPM. Again, as we saw in the 2021 election, that Congress and CPM both together showed a great promise with a massive rally at Eden Gardens. Or was it Brigade Parade Ground?
Brigade Parade.
Yeah. And what happened right after that? They retreated. They understood that it is inadvisable to let the Muslim vote get divided. So, in effect, the polity of West Bengal will always remain bipolar. It will never be multipolar. No matter how many parties are in the fray, if one challenger to the power gains eminence and prominence, another will recede tactically. But hypothetically speaking, if someday, I am stressing that this is hypothetical, CPM is not going to let it happen, despite its accepting harm that it would cause to itself, just as the Congress does. The Congress will remain in the margins, as will the CPM, except maybe in Panchayat election, where I'm hearing that they are asserting themselves. But then again, this upcoming Panchayat election is going to be extremely violent. And in the face of that violence, whether CPM candidates will be able to even file their nominations. Because 5 years ago, several potential candidates were killed at the doorstep of the SDM office, right when they were going to enter the office and file their nomination. In case that does not happen and CPM is able to field its candidates, in that case, the Panchayat election is going to be a tripolar contest. Congress is ruled out even here. But normally, I would say that in a state election and Lok Sabha election, the CPM and Congress will both retreat tactically to the advantage of the Trinamool Congress. And that is a problem for the BJP. Because then, let's say in a seat that has seen 50,000 votes and the margin is decided by less than 5,000 votes, even if a Congress candidate and a CPM candidate who have led a very lackluster campaign manage to get 2,000 or 3,000 votes each, that would be a decider. So if they retreat completely, ordering their cadre to not make their presence be felt at all, in that case, all those votes go to the Trinamool Congress. So this is a challenge for the BJP. But
So,
if
Surajit, please, say,
yeah,
please continue.
no,
Please
if
continue.
at all,
Continue.
finally, in fact, across India, it is seen that BJP mostly wins in a multipolar scenario, and it quite often loses when the fight is bipolar, except when it is fighting the Congress. So, in case it is fighting the Congress, for example, in the next Rajasthan election, I'm very certain that Ashok Gehlot will be defeated, even though it is bipolar, because that is Congress. The BJP is able to defeat Congress in bipolar fights, but not regional powers in bipolar fights. It cannot defeat Nitish Kumar and Lalu Yadav's combination in Bihar. It cannot defeat DMK in Tamil Nadu. It cannot defeat Trinamool Congress in West Bengal. That is very clear. When the vote is bipolar, it is in BJP's interest that the contest turns multipolar.
So, Surajit, at this juncture, I'd like to know that if from the Panchayat election the entire political climate in Bengal gets tripolar, the Trinamool Congress, the left, and the Bharatiya Janata Party. So, do you think this is a prime time for the Bharatiya Janata Party to exert its ideological conviction in a clear terms? Do you think that till this moment, unfortunately, the Bharatiya Janata Party has been maintaining a very good position as a centrist one? But if it gets tripolar in Bengal, if it gets completely clear, so do you think that the Bharatiya Janata Party's ideological conviction must be spoken in the strongest terms? Number one. And the very last question. We are noticing that Bengal is also changing rapidly. The political misgivings and expressions of the communitarian politics is gaining its ugly head again in Bengal. Now, when there were the demographic changes, there's a rise of Islamic extremism at several parts of Bengal, and to counter it, there is also a rise in the Hindu extremism. Do you think the violent political climate of Bengal, if there is a communitarian representation to that, is going to be more violent in the coming years? These are the final two questions for you. Yes.
First of all, whether it should assert its ideology more strongly, yes, of course, that is advisable. But will it follow the advice? That is questionable. Because what happens is, it is Bharatiya Janata Party is very wary about the kind of impression it gives out, not only to the domestic but also the foreign audience. It also wants to be spoken in glorious terms in all forums of the United States, of Europe, and most importantly, Middle East. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates are very good friends of Modi now, and even Egypt just recently. He got the highest civilian award of Egypt just recently. So whether they will do it, very hesitantly, very hesitantly, as we have just seen in the recently concluded Karnataka election. At the last moment, they think of Hindutva and believe that that will play a trick. That does not happen. It makes the party come across as hypocritical. So at the last moment, taking one line out of the Congress manifesto, the BJP tried to project the Congress as anti-Bajrang Bali, because it was going to ban the Bajrang Dal. The Congress had promised. And then DK Shivkumar said that, well, that is not to be taken seriously. And then the Hindutva thrust of BJP fizzled out. So even in West Bengal, if you keep talking this nonsensical Vikas, Vikas, Vikas all the time, and in the last round of campaign, you suddenly cling on to Hindutva, it will not work. Number one. Number two, it should demonstrate in various states, because Bengalis are also very avid news consumers. They are aware of the things that are happening across the country and the world. Very often, BJP has to hear this allegation that it remains pro-Hindu only till the time it is in the opposition, and the moment it gets the chance to form a government, it grows cold feet. And something similar is you can see happening in Andhra Pradesh, where it is shouting from the rooftops that the YSRCP government, led by Jagan Mohan Reddy, is pro-Christian and anti-Hindu. Who is listening to them? Nobody. Because you have to, after forming the government, establish your Hindutva credentials, which is not happening in many BJP ruled states. But in the case that there is a tripolar contest, what will be the differentiator between BJP, Congress, and CPM unless it harps on Hindutva? Because there is no other differentiator. BJP says Mamata Banerjee is bad, Congress says Mamata Banerjee is bad, CPM says Mamata Banerjee is bad. What's the difference between them? The difference has to be Hindutva, which Congress and CPM will never touch even with a barge pole. So then there is the point of cleverly using Hindutva and credibly using it, even without drawing the ire of all leftist, think tanks and media houses and leftist governments across the world, etc. The clever way of doing that is use the same kind of language that leftists use. Talk about human rights, for example. Do Hindus not have human rights? So talk about the violation of human rights of Hindus in West Bengal. You don't have to do, maybe chant Jai Shri Ram 5 times less if needed. But work for Hindus. Work for Hindus in a way that Shri Ram will be happy. I don't think Shri Ram is very happy with the BJP. So you have to be, you cannot play with God. Even talking about spirituality, talking about religiosity, you cannot cheaply use the name of God. You have to be sincere.
The Surajit, on the next question. Now, the answer of the next question. What's your answer on that?
If
no,
you
I'm saying that
once again.
I'm that Bengal is changing very rapidly. The demographic changes are there. There is a rise of Islam extremism, and to counter it, there is also the rise of Hindu nationalism. So when the political representatives are changing very fast in this matter, we forget about all these political affiliations and everything. What we find in day-to-day lives, even in the ground and the social media, that Hindu nationalism is in a better position than it was even 5 years back. That people are getting conscious. Okay, so in this sector, when two opposing extreme ideologies, Islamists and Hindu nationalism, are getting into a close clash. So, do you think, abiding by the legacy of the state of political violence, the coming days are going to be more violent? Do you think so?
Yes. But the silver lining to the dark cloud is the fact that Hindus, as a collective, as a community, are sensitized to the danger of extinction only when the enemy is at the doorstep. Till the time enemy is very distant, they are very relaxed. Hindu, Muslim, bhai bhai and all that nonsense. What I call Sarvagaram Vada Pav or Sarvdham Sambhav, whatever that is. So in a way, it is good that Islamism is really threatening the very existence of West Bengal, which Shyama Prasad Mukherjee somehow managed to retain in India, because it was going to go out of our hands. This Bengal Foundation Day that the BJP observed just recently, not with much fanfare. It kind of did not quite take off. But
Surajit, unfortunately, BJP tried to skip the event. How unfortunate it is! It is true. Yes. BJP tried to. Since I happen to be one of the speakers in a public meeting that was organized at the very center of the central Calcutta, just opposite to the house of Swami Vivekananda.
Right.
There was the presence of the people, but at that area also, even that was at a stone's throw distance from the BJP state committee, the BJP workers who were present at the meeting were discussing. I heard they told me even the BJP state unit preferred to skip the event. I do not know why, but it preferred to skip the event.
Right. So that is true. That is unfortunate also. What I was trying to look at was a comparison between communal riots in Bengal in, let's say, 2017-18 and communal riots that took place just very recently during Hanuman Jayanti and Ram Navami. The difference that I see is that back then, 5 or 6 years ago, it seemed that Islamists were encircling Kolkata. The riots were happening in suburbs, not in Kolkata. Like we were hearing, or at least the rest of India might have for only once heard the name Dhulaguri. Where is Dhulaguri? You ask somebody in Rajasthan or somebody in Maharashtra, do you know where Dhulaguri is? Why did it earn its dubious name? Because of the Muslim attacks on Hindus, right? Then there was Boshirhat, that film actress's constituency. What is her name? Okay, anyway, I'm
I
poor
forgot.
at poor at
I can't. I can't
there
remember.
is never mind, never mind. So these are all suburbs, or Barashat, these are all suburbs of Kolkata. They are not Kolkata. Now the riots are happening in Kolkata, which means that they had first formed a circle and now they are reducing the radius of the circle, squeezing out Hindus, squeezing out the Hindu lifeblood from the capital of West Bengal, which is Kolkata. Now, what was happening earlier when the rest of India were trying to reason with Bengalis, saying, why don't you guys get sensitized to the clear and present danger? Because it was not clear and present danger. It was a distant danger. Why do you think BJP entered West Bengal from North Bengal and not from South Bengal? Because a North Bengali does not have to be shaken and told, look, there is a threat of Islamism. A person who lives in Jalpaiguri or Shiliguri finds every day the infiltrators from Bangladesh passing by. There are pockets in North Bengal where the Bangladeshi taka works and the Indian rupee does not work in local markets. You know, somewhat that people saw last year in the film Kashmir Files, that a vegetable vendor was accepting Pakistani notes. You remember that scene in Kashmir Files where Anupam Kher and Mithun Chakraborty, they went to talk to a vegetable seller and he refused to take Indian notes. That is the reality if you go to the extreme end of North Bengal. Which is why people of Kolkata, mostly the rest of India, know Bengalis from people of Kolkata, not from people of Bankura, people of Bardhaman, people of Medinipur. Which is why they get this impression that they are so callous and so careless about their own survivability. What can we do about it? Now, an average Bengali does not have to be shaken and told that, look, there is danger. Because the danger has reached his doorsteps. So once this has happened, and in this changed demographic situation, there is another change that you would see in the counter-offensive, Hindu counter-offensive, which I observed very closely. Something strange about Islamism in West Bengal now, as opposed to Islamism in West Bengal when West Bengal was just formed out of the undivided Bengal, is the fact that those Islamists were Bengali Muslims. These Islamists of today, you know, the places I named, go to Boshirhat, for example. The Muslims you will see are speaking in Urdu. They don't speak Bengali. You go to, these slum-like pockets, even in Esplanade East, behind Metro Cinema in Kolkata, a thing as simple as wear helmets while driving two-wheelers is written in Urdu. Does an average Bengali Muslim read Urdu? Does he know the script? So what has clearly happened in engineering a demographic change in West Bengal is that a national level and perhaps even international level mafia is working, which is engineering this change. It is not happening naturally. Most of these riotous Muslims are Hindi speaking or Urdu speaking. They are not Bengali speaking Muslims. So artificially the demography is being changed, number one. Number two, the radius of violence is being reduced drawing closer and closer to Kolkata, and now it has reached Kolkata. Now, a party like BJP, an organization like RSS, has no other option but to assert its Hindutva. There is absolutely no other option. So, even in the changed scenario, it is all the more important that they create this differentiator between BJP, Congress, and CPM.
Thank you, Surajit. Thank you very much for a nice explanation. Thank you, thank you. Two things that you there was a question here that one person was asking that why is BJP behaving so softly in Bengal? Is there a setting between the two parties of the BJP and Trinamool Congress? There was a question here, and other one is that you have spoken of a film just a few minutes back, of 10 15 minutes back,
The
but at the
Kashmir
time your
files.
voice crashed. No,
The
before
Kashmir
that, before
files.
that. Not but prior to that, when almost in the beginning, you spoke of a film. You have spoken of a film.
Okay. So if I'm reminded of the context, I can recall that film.
Oh, I
Guru
just
Dutt's
do it.
film. I had
Oh,
mentioned Guru Dutt's films in the
okay, oh, good.
1960s. Yeah,
Yes, certainly.
which
50s.
which
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, you take for example Kagaz Ke Phool or Pyasa.
Mm-hmm.
They are
Right.
reflection of frustration of the society.
Certainly, agreed.
Yeah.
So, Surajit, thank you. So, thank you very much. It's almost more than 9:30. We are graced by your presence here to be on the show, and I hope that we will be able to contact you again in some more critical issues at this time, at this session. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. And everybody, good night.
Good night.